Hello, everybody. Welcome to the international edition of Everything in Moderation, episode Who Knows What. But we are here today, and we're here to discuss a topic that's very near and dear to Danny's heart. So we'll let him take it away.
So today we are talking about manufacturing consent, the political economy of the mass media. It's a book by, let's see here. Let me make sure I get the author's names right. Well, it's Noam Chomsky, of course, who's my favorite guy ever. He is a linguist and a political philosopher, I would say. And he's definitely done a lot of work in the past, and he's pretty famous at this point. But the other author was Edward S. Herman. And what they did together in the book was they made a model called the propaganda model. Now, what does this mean? This means that they took specific conditions that happen in certain states and applied it against what could happen, in real life. Like it really is just like political theory. So what he looked at was a lot of capitalist nations. Any capitalist nation would really apply to his political theory. Like you could think Guam, you could think Philippines. You can think anywhere that have a free market structure. This pretty much applies. It's except like a highly regulated structure. But what they argue is that the mass media is inherently, or like journalists are inherently not able to be a check on the government. And in turn, the government is able to use mass media as a propaganda tool. Now you're like, what am I talking about? Right? Like when you watch the news, you're not thinking propaganda. Neither am I. Nobody is. But let's just take a look at two clips here. We have Christian could show up, and maybe we get a better idea, because I'm going to be honest with you, face value, these clips, they're going to look like normal clips from, a news station, but I'll break down, what's happening and where you could see this theory taking place.
Do you have a preference for which one first, Danny?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. All right, let's get that going. All right.
Take note of the advice that he gives to candidates here.
I quoted you on Nicole's broadcast as saying, if it's Warren, they'll lose 48 states. With that as the backdrop, how did you think they did tonight?
I want to work back from, to me, the moment where the room came alive. And to me, it's the ultimate tell. When Inslee said our biggest threat is Donald Trump. And that, to me, still is what is driving voters and still was not touched tonight. The reason some people reacted positively to de Blasio, because you saw another bully up there. He was kind of invading other people's spaces. Cory Booker had a strength. The reason people have not gone after it to this point, Biden, is because he is seen as the anti-Trump, and it will backfire at this point until he's not. So to me, that is the big thing, and it was not addressed tonight. This is not an issues campaign. This is who is the bully that can beat the bully. And I think, interestingly enough, Booker showed a certain strength there. Even de Blasio, even though I found him annoying also, he cut through. And I think that is the driver. It's not issues. It's not universal health care. It's not a woman's reproductive rights, as important as that is. We have lived through all these things before. We've lived through Iran. We have lived through Korea. We have lived through issues on health care. We have not lived through an assault on our democracy and an assault on our senses. That is what everybody is lensing everything through. So I don't think Warren moved that ball particularly. I do think, interestingly enough, Booker did move that ball.
Donnie, just to keep your frame around this, I've got a list of who dropped Trump's name the most. And you're right, Warren didn't mention Donald Trump. Neither did de Blasio, based on this list. Amy Klobuchar invoked Donald Trump. 9 times, and Tim Ryan second with 7. Do you think that an opportunity was missed
Yes.
to sort of indict all of the moral and legal and ethical and policy trespasses of the Trump years? And if you do, why do you think they made that decision? It was obviously a strategic choice made
It's
by...
the wrong. Some people want to hear somebody stand up and say, this is a horrific assault on who we are on every level, everything we stand for. And he needs to go, and I'm the one to take him out. People are yearning for that. They are crying for that. You heard it even in that applause to Jay Inslee, who other than that had a very bad night. I don't understand how people don't know that. That supersedes everything else 10x.
Spoken like a truly out of touch, rich douche.
I just had to get that in there.
That's good. That's definitely a good place to cut it off. And we'll just go right to the next video.
Sure.
Independent Senator Bernie Sanders from the state of Vermont. He is leading a group of progressive Democratic senators demanding $1,200 stimulus checks be included in the next relief bill. Senator, we've heard your impassioned argument. Help us understand, how many other senators have you convinced to support these stimulus checks? Any Republicans on board?
Yes, I think there is one, but Senator Hawley indicates that he is supportive of a $1,200 per person direct payment and $600 or $500 for children. I think the Democratic caucus is ready to go forward on that. Yesterday, I sent out a letter with 5 other senators, and I think we can have virtually all of the United States Democratic senators on board. The question now is whether or not Mitch McConnell is going to turn his back, as your report just indicated, on the incredible suffering that the American people, the working people, are now experiencing. Unemployment high. We have a record level of hunger in America. Millions of people are facing evictions. This is an emergency. Congress has got to respond aggressively to help working families. You know, Stephanie, I always get a kick. Here in Washington, when we go to war, there's endless amounts of money. Tax breaks for billionaires, endless amounts of money. Corporate welfare, endless amounts of money. When children are going hungry in America today, suddenly we don't have enough money. That's crap. That's wrong. And if we have got to stay here throughout Christmas, which is the last thing in the world that I would want to do, we are going to stay here because we are going to make sure that struggling working families in this country get the help they desperately need.
Senator, I'm not agreeing with you fundamentally, but I want to talk to you practically. You've been the lead sponsor of 422 bills during your 30 years in Congress, but only 7 of them have become law. Given that record and how dire things are, as you just laid out, do you need to find another lane or take a different approach here?
I yearn for the sweet embrace of death.
Oh man.
So that's some shout out to Kyle Klinsky there. But just real quick, I wanted to ask the group, like, what things like stood out to you in those specific clips that you would say gives MSNBC a bias to the Democratic Party?
It's not even just a bias to the Democratic Party, it's a bias to a particular part. I mean, because they didn't just go against Trump, they didn't even acknowledge any of the Democrat nominees. It was all about Trump, you know, like who's worse to Trump. But then go to the Bernie Sanders part. I don't even know what she meant by that. I don't agree with you fundamentally.
Well, that could be considered a political hit job. So like that, she transferred from what he was talking about, the idea, and said, all right, bro, you got like 7 bills passed. Like you suck at your job, you know?
Right.
And that's the primary like clip. Like that's what MSNBC did to Bernie in that one.
I really noticed like the baiting, you know, in that clip. It was like, you know, asking Bernie Sanders, you know, his proposition on, you know, working on that specific bill. And then, you know, he answers it and she flips it around with like, okay, but you only had 7 bills passed out of these hundreds of bills that you have worked on in your career. So I think that we see that a lot in all news outlets, you know, And now it's become very common where you see the baiting happen. Whether they fall for it or not, is dependent. But yeah, we can talk a little bit about that too. Yeah.
I think one of
Also, you go, Christian.
one of the things I noticed like right away was just like her facial expression and body language. She was just waiting. Like I don't even think that she was listening to him. She was like, whoever directs her and like what she has to say, they're like, yo, listen, like when he starts talking about his shit, you're gonna bring this up that's completely unrelated to the issue. And she was just smirking and she was like getting ready. She's like, oh, I'm gonna end this man's career right now.
They had the picture right out there. They had it. They had the numbers right there. And to be fair, to give him a little, not to be bashing on him, I'm sure that not the similar number of failures, but I doubt people in Congress have that many bills passed, out of what they've tried to do anyway, because it's not like Republicans and Democrats are going to agree with each other on everything. And you're exactly right. She probably didn't. She dismissed everything he said just to show what they were already planning to do. And the other guy, and they wanted to ask questions about the first clip, about the people, and the guy goes, no, fuck them, just divert anything from that. Let's just talk about Trump and who's going to be the bully to him. He literally goes, I mean, women's rights, this stuff, that's important, but let's focus on what gives us money first, so
exactly. And you guys hit it right on the head. You guys found out the two things that I'm trying to talk about, and these are the top part of the less important part of the 5 filters of mass media. So the two that were under scope here were flack, and it was the common enemy. Those are the two. They have other names in the actual theory, but I'm just trying to use those as like just keywords just to keep it on topic. So what do I mean by flack? The flack was presented in Bernie Sanders' clip, where the political pundit, and where flack is basically, is they take any idea that really like goes outside of the system, right? And they say, listen, this doesn't conform to our advertisers who make money off of the people, which are the product, and we'll get into that later. And I don't think this is a good idea for the government either, because we have special connections, and we'll get into that as well. I'm damn starting at a weird part in this, but I think it would be relevant because of these two clips. So the flack is them just throwing them out. And what it is they try everything to discredit the source. In this case, it would be Bernie Sanders, but they do it a lot to a lot of politicians. If you remember, Donald Trump to MSNBC when he was running was a little fucking joke, right? They were just like, this guy can never be president. He's president. So they try to do that, to discredit sources and voices in the state, and it really is caused by conglomerates and the government. So, but let's move on to the second part, the common enemy. Now, Patrick, you hit it right on the head with that about Trump being attacked. Say they're like, well, we have to get Trump, right? This is what this whole thing's about. This is primary, the whole thing's about. And Biden, he's the most anti-Trump guy out there, which is hilarious just within itself, because if you were to look at their policy right now, compare it, because we can see it now, it's pretty similar. But that's besides the point, right? They use Trump as a common enemy. And they say, this is the most important thing right now. There's other shit, there's policy which affects your life. No. But Trump, he's like cursing on national TV. It's the worst thing for you. And that's really how they go and get you, these two layers. Now, you might be asking yourself at this point, why is our system like this? Why does the news media, why do they have a bias to begin with? And this is going to be a little long talking point, but I'll definitely jump in and have you guys just say your piece about it. But let's first start with the first reason. So mass media, if you haven't checked, is owned a lot of the times by corporations. And by corporations, I also mean conglomerates. So there are companies owned by companies that are fucking completely huge. They're like the Google, like for example, Fox News, they are owned by the Koch brothers, they have a huge company, and then they now, I think it's like News something, and then it's owned, and then as a company is Fox News. The same thing with MSNBC. And you'll even hear some newspapers, for example, which is interesting. Like Jeff Bezos owns what newspaper again? I'm totally blanking. I think Washington Post.
What? Yeah, Washington Post, right?
He owns the Washington Post, and there's actually a little thing, a little slip up from one of the mainstream media guys, and they're saying, why isn't Jeff Bezos just using Washington Post as a way to kind of like propagate what he wants? Like, I don't want this Amazon union. Use the Washington Post to put hit jobs on any kind of unions. So that's where the ownership part comes into play. Can you guys think of anything like that? Like any other like news channels that are like that?
Every mainstream news channel. I mean, if they're
pretty
owned
much
by
it.
something and people are investing in something in the news channel, as well as people putting the advertisements on there, you want it to fit and narrow it to a certain audience. I mean, the larger audience you get and the more views you get, the better. And also, how do you get an audience without a good news story? Everything that doesn't fit the news, fit their news agenda, let's say, they'll shove it to local news. That's not it. I mean, that was a murder, sure, but let's look at this other murder that fits it better. And people get angry at the one murder that rarely kind of happens. Although it's terrible, it doesn't happen to the extent as other, crazy things. So yes, it happens in every single large news corporation you see. Also with Fox News being Republican as well. I mean, if you look at the Democrat sources, which are the majority,
they have like 3 or 4, right?
Yeah,
there's
what's
a
the
lot
main
of
enemy
news
there? White
sources that are like
supremacy.
that.
Now that Donald Trump's gone, and then what is it for Fox News? Probably terrorism. I don't know.
I would say that the terrorism bit is shared by every single, and that
yeah,
draws
but like
into
a specific
the 5th one.
Right, I mean, yeah, but probably like talking about like jihadists and stuff like that, So they find an enemy.
I would also say MSNBC is definitely like that. Like if you were to scroll back then, a lot of the news, I would probably say maybe CNN wasn't like so into it, but still,
I would.
I'm just saying now.
But I would say that Fox News definitely has a bias now, especially with terrorism.
If I could just step in right here, I think that my dad's a ongoing watcher of Fox, so I see it all the time. I think that what Fox is like turned into is basically just like anti-woke, basically, in the sense that like they complain more about like Mr. Potato Head than like things that actually matter. And like, yeah, like stuff like that like kind of is annoying. Like, okay, yeah, like you're canceling Mr. Potato Head, or like you're canceling like Dr. Seuss books. And granted, like there are like some it's kind of outdated humor in some ways, but like they focus more on that, and it's just like, bro, like no one really cares. Like,
and
my Eric on the other podcast says he wants to cancel people who cancel culture. It's like, but
funny.
Yeah,
like Uno reverse card.
Well, that's the loophole of it, though. I mean, I think Fox News would argue, well, we'll start being less biased and just get to the real stuff once everybody else does, because without us, maybe Newsmax, and who else is going to do it? So
yeah, you guys are touching upon the common enemy aspect. Fox News in that example would use the left, not the liberals, as the common enemy, like the quote unquote communists, for example. But Patrick, before you actually jumped ahead to the second one, the advertisement ones, and you're just going at it. I love it. You definitely researched this topic, so I'm definitely glad about that. So with the second one, as Patrick mentioned, they will, or they have to, as a business model, use their watchers, the audiences, as their product. I mean, how else are they going to make money? All they're doing all day is talk on a box, and maybe you can make a little thing on the side from like Comcast, but they're not giving them nearly as much. Or I think they might even have to like They probably make pennies on the dollar from that shit. So the advertisements is the big way they make money, and so their main focus is what? Getting more people, getting more eyes on it. So these news stations want to make sure that they are completely compliant with any of these businesses. So, for example, you're not going to see a lot of hit jobs on, Bill Gates by MSNBC or CNN or really any like a lot of the major billionaires, unless it's about a social issue. If it's about a social issue, that's something else. Like for example, they made data privacy a social issue, kind of, even though it's definitely like a liberty issue. But they definitely use that, but they don't talk about some of the big problems with like huge companies like that, and they never talk antitrust at all. Like there's zero antitrust talk in the news today. And that's really because what are you going to do? Anger the guy paying you? You know what I mean? They are literally giving you money. So what does that do? And that will eventually draw on the third point with complicity. But what do you guys think?
I just wanted to add that, like, we've known that, from the beginning of news channels, positioning, and advertising has always been present. But my problem with the media now is, reporting falsely. And, not only Fox News, but, we see it in CNN too. We see any big news source. I actually have a friend who told me that Black Lives Matter organized the January 6th riot. And that was something that, I was like, this can't, you can't be serious. But again, this was, something that was reported on the news. So, that's where it kind of just turns from positioning to, false advertising too, I would say.
Can you think of one organization or one company that would benefit over that statement?
I can think of one off the top of my head. I can think of, political affiliations. I can think of affiliations. Yeah.
One thing that goes on top of my head is the NRA, baby. Like, and when shit like that happens, people will be like,
well, all guns are out of stock anyway.
Guns. I know, and it always
anyway. I mean,
exactly, and then they're worried about gun legislation, and then it increases gun sales a lot. Yeah. So like you can that's just one example, and there's certain biases like for example, why do you think the MyPillow advertisements are on Fox News on loop 24/7? You probably know this, Christian.
Well, he works. Yeah, well, I know that. I mean, he's a open conservative. I mean, you'd see him on stuff probably like Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro supports him. All that. That makes sense. And he's but the thing is, he's an open supporter. And I think when we bring back to weeks and weeks ago when we talked about the great topic of media literacy, what's important to know is that what would be helpful is that if a news corporation, especially a big one, is biased, just say it. Like Fox News, just say it. Besides Chris Wallace, who's definitely not Republican, just say it. If you're CNN, just say you're biased. I mean, the Daily Wire says they're conservative, they're open. If you're gonna just do it, just say it. It would be much more beneficial for people who aren't as media literate or just are going about their daily lives and don't have time to focus and cross-reference.
So I think that, we could bring like psychology into this too. As Maria actually mentioned, like she brought up like some marketing topics, and psychology is interwoven into marketing. It's how corporations get people to buy things, or how just groups of people just get people to buy things. I think that one of the things that you see in what Patrick touched on was with like, just say you're biased. But the thing is they don't really know that they're biased. They think that they're right. I think that truly some do think that they are like they're saying the most true statement. For me, and for all of us here, I think that we could understand that like we're not really that smart in the grand scheme of things. Like there's always something that we could learn. So, and that's important to like, be humble about it too. But I guess it's part of their job to like speak with a purpose, speak with confidence. So I guess. Do they believe everything that they say? Probably not. But yeah, I think
A
that
famous quote by
But they
Hillary
understand their
Clinton
agenda.
is have a separate position from your actual position in politics. So I guarantee the news will do the same.
definitely.
But if you want to move on to the third and most important filter of this theory, it's called the mass media elite, and this gets into, why is this system really bad, and it's because it encourages what's called complicity. So, for example, if you go on any news channel, you're going to get experts, right? Who are these experts? No one knows who they are. We just know that they're experts, right? But, they come from either the government, they come from institutions, they come from big business. All these people help get more views because it's interesting to hear from the experts, isn't it? And they have their own opinions. But, they have influence into that news channel too. Imagine if Fox News upset Donald Trump to the point where he never came on. How you think viewership would drop at Fox News? Definitely. And it's
It
the
already
same
has.
thing. Yeah. Same thing with MSNBC, CNN. They're like, chance to talk to Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and they do the same thing with politicians as well. And politicians, they're fine at this game. And the reason why it is because it's time to advertise, baby. Like, and it's the same thing with any experts on big business and things like that. Like Jeff Bezos is not going on like MSNBC talk about his next charity for no reason, right? He's trying to make himself look good and his company look good. So, all these players in the game of mass media, they all got a stake and they all help control what you watch on a day-to-day basis. So that's why this book is called, Manufacturing Consent, because they are framing these ideas through the fourth and fifth layer, FLAC and the common enemy. They're framing these ideas and this perspective that you are reality really that you're living in, and they don't really allow for a lot of outside thinking. And that's why I'm glad that the rise of the independent media, like YouTubers, Kyle Klinsky, shout out, like have been more prominent, and you see them at both sides of the system, right? You see Ben Shapiro, for example, my personal favorite, Jesse Lee Peterson, even though he might not have very good takes. I freaking love him. He's hilarious, and I love independent media, and this surge of independent media could help solve what's going on now, as long as YouTube doesn't dip their pockets in. But like, what do you guys think of this? Do you think like any news organizations out there like have gone around it? I mean, obviously, if you look at Al Jazeera, they've gone around it a little bit because they're showing this. They have an article of about the five filters in Noam Chomsky. So, what do you guys think? Do you think other countries besides the United States like have news stations that work?
I'm sure they do, but it also goes to say what is allowed. I mean, even on YouTube, you have certain independent sources taken off. Steven Crowder, the controversial, but he's a comedian at heart. He was just banned again. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people get the keywords taken and sometimes banned off of certain stuff. And this is the U.S., which is supposed to be more free. So I mean, if you look in England or I mean the Philippines, obviously probably not as much leeway. This is just an opinion, though. I have no data on this.
Yeah, I just wanted to add into back to what Patrick was saying. In my personal opinion, I don't think many news channels, probably elsewhere would go around it. And I think Chomsky really tied into the idea of like who's in this position of power, and him, his whole entire book, stating how these news media outlets won't give up their position of power. Therefore, they won't tell you what's going on behind the scenes. And now, at this point, I don't know if any viewers are saying, "Oh, that's very conspiracy theorist of you," but that is what we're deemed, So, and I think it's important to talk about it because it's not conspiracy theory. It's what's actually going on behind the scenes, even if it's not explicitly said through news media.
Yeah, you could look this stuff up, and it's not it's not conspiracy theory at all. It's just thinking critically, and it's good to question, which is what the media should be doing better rather than having pre-planned things.
One of the things that I kind of want to bring up is if you look at China, for example, the media ownership, you could tell where the power is. So
very easy.
China,
you're quite open about it.
In China, almost all media stations, if not all, are state owned, and here they're all corporate and private owned. So that tells you right there. That tells you right there.
Yeah, and I mean, a great conversation to have maybe next time would be what's the real difference when it comes to media, when it comes to state owned and corporate owned, because at the end of the day, it's owned by a certain group of high power that wants certain things, and this is how they get it, and they want to show only particular things. Me personally, I don't think there's a huge difference anymore when it comes to that, but
Danny, I have a question for you. So, do you believe, if we're having this conversation, other people are also staying woke and, having this conversation too. Do you think that if there's a transition where people are actually realizing this, the news medias will have to kind of change their position?
That's a good point because that kind of explains what happened in the 1970s with the separation. I was talking to Christian about this before. The separation between policy and like social policy, like economics and stuff like that. So what their game, right, is they kind of, certain channels will just kind of like focus on like immigration is a good issue. Americans are extremely split over immigration, right? So they choose whatever side is most benefit for them, aka through the advertisers or whoever's they're backing, and they're like, okay, this is the new social issue, like what Christian was bringing up with the Dr. Seuss thing. That's a social issue, common enemy. Like this is where it's at, right? They'll always be able to find a common enemy that people will always be like, all right. Not everyone's going to go and read Noam Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent. I'm just going to tell you right there. It's not going to be standard reading in the United States. But these are things that people fall through, and this guy fell through it. I fell for it 100%, hands over heel. Like when we look at the 9/11, what happened there? Horrible event, horrible tragedy. And like through it, I was like, you know what? I want to go serve this country, and I want to be involved in this war. And my brother was like talking to me. He's like, do you know why the Afghanistan war started? And I was like, no. And that's when I started getting into politics. So, there's always the reason why this stuff's happening. We don't go into war for nothing. Why do we go into the Vietnam War? Some people would say it's to fight communism, but what's the legality of fighting communism? You know what I mean? There's a lot of things that they will use to warp the actual story in a way that they can get 50-50 split, because that's how America works. Think about it. We're all fighting each other over peanuts when the cake is over here and everybody else is eating it, not us. You know what I mean? We're fighting over issues that aren't super important a lot of the times. And it's definitely on both sides, right? And the media tries to do this. They don't want a majority all the time. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Those are very good points. Well, I'm very happy to be able to talk to you guys on this podcast, and hopefully we get more viewers. So we'll keep you updated if it's not news media outlets.
We'll become our own independent news media outlet.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Danny, we didn't get through all 5, right?
we did.
We did.
Yes,
Okay.
we did. Yeah.
We blended that in nicely.
Yeah, because honestly, the first 3 definitely blend together because they're really just about the structure of it all. But the last 2 are kind of like just how they use it. You know what I mean? I tried going backwards just because of the videos, but
Gotcha.
I hope that helped people's understanding.
All right. Well, that is all we have for this week on Everything in Moderation. We will come back next week with, I'm sure, another electric topic. I was very excited to discuss this one, and whatever we decide on, I have something in mind. But we'll discuss it in the group chat later. And for everyone else, have a great weekend.
Have a good one.
See you, everyone.